Hi folks, I'm Ed Amoroso and I'm sitting here with Jeff Williams, who's the co-founder and CTO of Contrast Security. Hi Jeff.
Hi Ed.
How are you doing?
Doing well. Love New York.
Yes, appreciate you coming by.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Hey, before we get into AppSec and all the different technology that you're one of the experts on, tell us about yourself.
Oh, sure. I started out in computer science. I had a programming job for several years and accidentally got into security on a classified government project, very high assurance, and I sort of got the fundamentals of security there. Then I went and I took a job as a security consultant. I did all kinds of network security consulting and multi-level secure systems and so on. And that company got acquired by Exodus Communications. Accidentally got into the internet space.
A lot of accidents going on here. It's like serendipity getting you into cybersecurity.
Yeah. Along the way, I also went back to law school about that same time. Wow. So I got my law degree at Georgetown. I guess I'm really not sure what I actually wanted to do. At Exodus, we started one of the world's first application security practices, and it was a perfect mix of security and my software background.
Right.
And so we started doing code reviews and training and pen tests and finding vulnerabilities and helping out companies. And then after the internet bubble crashed, that company kind of went bankrupt. 2002. So in 2002, I started a consulting company myself called Aspect Security, and we specialized only in application security, and did that for 12 years. We did AppSec work for some of the biggest financials on the planet, and a lot of the critical infrastructure apps in other industries as well.
Writing code or reviewing code or kind of both?
Well, mostly we focused on the AppSec side. So basically, they were writing the code and we were coming in to help them make sure what they produced was secure.
I see.
And that's a bunch of different services there. And then the tools in that space are so frustrating that it pushed us. And from like 2009 to 2012 or 2013, we spent nights and weekends and invented a new way of doing application security that eventually became Contrast.
When people think about operating systems and mobile or IoT or something, maybe not IoT, bad example, but you tend to think of it as maybe more monolithic. Like if you're doing operating system security, there's not as many choices as, for example, application security. Am I thinking about that right? It seems like all of a sudden you get this explosion of different possibilities when you talk about apps.
Sure.
And I would imagine that would make it hard to do security for them.
There are a lot more degrees of freedom, right? So I call network security is like Lego. Application security is like clay. You can build anything you want with code, and so that means that there's constantly new challenges, which I kind of like.
Tell me what you think about as you're trying to secure an app. I know a lot of the folks watching might know about certain principles like OWASP and others.
Sure.
What goes through your mind? Is there a framework? Is there a methodology? Is it just experience? How do you go about securing an app?
Well, I think the interesting part for me when I was doing consulting was going into companies and learning about their business. And they're very different. I went into companies that do warehouse, supply kinds of businesses, newspapers, airlines, financial institutions of all kinds.
All over the map.
And what's interesting is to do AppSec, you got to understand the business because the threat model is directly tied to what they do and what they care about. It might be privacy, it might be confidentiality or integrity. They might care about breaches in their reputation. It really varies. And then applying something like a checklist like OWASP or whatever, and I wrote it, but really it's just a list, right? Doing application security is about thinking about the threat model of the business, how they've translated that business into code, and looking for the seams and gaps and openings where they either forgot something or didn't implement it right. They exposed their business. And that to me is the creative process that makes AppSec interesting.
How do you kind of determine what can be automated in that work and what requires an expert and the judgment of a human being there? How do you make that determination?
Well, so the traditional AppSec tools are pretty terrible. So for a long time when I was consulting, I thought, really the best way to do this is with human experts. It doesn't help to go get a tool that returns, hundreds of false positives and then misses a bunch of real vulnerabilities. It actually creates more work than it helps. So when we created Contrast, we were trying to create a platform that had access to more information so we could expand the set of things that we could do automatically. And I think we were largely successful in creating that access, which gives us the ability to find more stuff. But there's always going to be, so like, in the degrees of freedom sense, developers can do some new crazy thing that exposes their business. And my goal is for them to easily be able to turn that into code so that it can become part of their AppSec platform, their automated platform. So from that point forward, they'll never make that mistake again.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes AppSec teams like to think somewhat deliberately about where the security goes with respect to the app. Like they might think of it as in front of the app, kind of next to the app, inside the app, around. What are the right sort of descriptive words for how you guys approach that? Do you sit in it or you sit around it? How would you describe what you guys do?
So the key to doing good application security is to giving your automated analysis engine lots of different kinds of information. Information about the code, information about HTTP traffic, configuration files, libraries, frameworks, backend connections.
Real time, runtime. Right?
Well, I think that's best. Most of the tools that are on the market are kind of single source tools. Static analysis can only see source code.
Right.
Dynamic scanners can only see HTTP traffic. Other tools can only see other pieces of the elephant, if you will. So the key is to get all that information into your analysis engine at one time. Then you can really see vulnerabilities. And it's that information advantage that gives Contrast a huge edge in accuracy and coverage and speed.
Is that both static analysis and runtime? You do both, or you do one of the, how do you approach that?
I don't like to, so I think those are bad categories, actually. The key is not whether it's a static analysis tool or dynamic analysis tool. The key is, does it have access to the information that's in the code? Does it have information to the information that's in the HTTP traffic, and so on? And so what we've done is we've taken all those analysis techniques and fused them into a single engine that you can add to your application and get all the benefit of all those techniques at once.
Have you seen people do some pretty crazy stuff where you go, oh my God. What's what top one or two craziest things you've seen in an app where you just sort of shook your head a little bit? And you don't have to name names.
I won't. So let's talk about a major Fortune 2 company. So it probably narrows it down. So
that really narrows it down.
Well, we found some, sort of an Easter egg in the application. And that was, it's not super dangerous, but what it implies is a massive loss of control over the development process. So that was interesting.
Was it like a benign Easter egg? Sort of
in this case, you'd go to some page and in the zip code field, you'd put in some keyword and come up with special pages and so on. Probably one of the most damning was at a major defense system that they had a complex cryptographic-based authentication scheme, browser, plugin, certificate, the whole nine. And I stared at it for a couple days, watching HTTP traffic going back and forth. And at some point, I was trying to just get the transaction down. Like, what does this actually all mean when it's going back and forth on the wire? Most developers don't see that, by the way. They write code and they see the behavior in the browser, but they don't necessarily know what's going back and forth on the wire. So I'm looking at the traffic going back and forth, and I see after you authenticate, the browser was sending the user's distinguished name to the server. And I thought, wait a minute, if we just verified a signature, why aren't we using that as the identity as opposed to sending it to the server? And so I sent my certificate, my signature, my nonce essentially, signed nonce, and another DN. I sent another DN of an admin. And so, bam, I'm in as admin, and I can do anything. Even though there's similar examples, this one's a little similar. I was
that required just some minor changes, right, to fix, right? You suppress the name request or something. Is that what
they had to actually rethink the way they needed a way to extract the identity from the signed nonce, so they had to verify the signature. They weren't verifying the signature very well. So. This was a funny one. I'm sitting in front of the CISO. And I'm trying to get him to buy our service to pen test and code review and so on. And he goes, well, what do you do? I'm like, well, we test stuff and we verify. And he's like, show me. I'm like, I figure I'm not going to win this, right? So I'm like, okay, what's your your URL?
Right,
So I put in the, I fired up, I think at that time it was WebScarab or something. And I just started watching the traffic go back and forth, and I see a new cookie called priv level. And I was like, what's the priv level cookie for? He goes, well, that's your privilege level, like I'm an idiot. And I'm like, okay, cool. So it's set to 4. What if I change it to 9? And he gives me this look like, you can't do that. And so I did, and bam, I'm admin, and I can delete accounts and steal all the data and
Good
everything.
Lord.
So lots and lots of crazy things. People just miss it. They don't, if you don't think like that all the time, the gaps and seams are invisible.
How do you find team members for your group? I know you have extremely high standards. You've been at this a long time. One of the best, certainly somebody I admire. When you're looking for people to be part of the team, are you pulling kids out of college? Are you looking for experienced programmers? How do you do that?
We've got two, on the R&D side at Contrast, we have 2 main kinds of folks, right? We've got our research labs, and those we're looking for, super security experts. On the development side, we're looking for great developers, full stack. We're a DevOps shop, so we release 6 or 7 times a day. And so, that's a different skill set. Not everyone at a security company has to be a security expert. We need people that are really great at building code. And of course, we use Contrast on Contrast 24/7, so that helps. But on the research side, and I think this is where your question is finding great security people is tricky. They have to have that security DNA. And so you look for those people that, on the one hand, they're the guys that are programming at nights and weekends. They're always learning new technologies. But they also have to be the kind of people that just look at things differently. They're constantly looking for how to make things break, how to make it do something that it wasn't designed to do. So they're the guys that want to send in bad input, fuzz applications. There's just a different mindset.
Think different.
So I had a guy, good example. This guy he by his nature, he would just constantly break things. Soda machines, web apps certainly, but even in his personal life, like he just couldn't help poking and prodding at stuff. So it's not all positive, right? Like being that kind of person can kind of mess up your life.
It makes you fun at parties, right?
Possibly.
Are you bullish about cybersecurity? You think the future will be bright? I know most of the people who do what we do see this gap, right? Offense, defense. Offense getting better at a rate faster than defense. Is that going to close? You think things will be able to catch up a little bit?
I'm pretty skeptical. And I hate to say that because I've dedicated my life to this field, and I spent a ton of time at OWASP trying to raise the bar for everybody. But the fact is, I wrote the first version of the OWASP Top 10 in 2002, and it's essentially the same today. We haven't really gotten very much better in that time. Applications still average 26.8 vulnerabilities per app. That's a staggering number. If they had 1 or 2 serious vulnerabilities, I'd be concerned, but 26 is a ridiculous number. I think we really need to do something different. We have to change things so it's not okay for companies to kind of do the minimum. And I think it's going to be, in a lot of ways, I think it's going to track the way that the automobile industry shifted, after Ralph Nader and all of that. It was a combination of legislation and lawsuits and companies deciding that building safe cars is actually better for their business. But those things all have to work together. And I think it's going to take time. There's probably going to be some disasters along the way before we wake up. I'm optimistic that it's doable. I really think it's possible if we set our mind to it. We waste a staggering amount of time in security doing things that don't matter. Checklist, compliance, kinds of things that don't really generate either security or value. And I think we can change the way security works to do better at that.
How do you feel about, in the old days, maybe 10 companies might write 10 different apps, but today it might be one company writing a really good app, putting it in the cloud, and the other 9 using it. You think cloud and maybe more standard parts and less software written by fewer companies shared amongst a bigger group. Is that one path toward maybe better app security, just literally less code?
So I've thought about this a good bit, and I wrote a project at OWASP called the Enterprise Security API, which was really pushing that philosophy, like, hey, you use standard components, and then you have to reinvent all this stuff.
And share and reuse. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that no matter what the standard components are out there, no matter where that level is, what developers do is they build custom stuff on top of that. They take advantage of the components that they have to build new and wonderful things. And as long as you give them the power to build interesting things, they also have the power to build super insecure things. And in fact, the more powerful those components get, the more crazy the screw-ups can be. And so, I kind of think of application security as like this layer that keeps rising. In the early 2000s, it was just straight HTTP web apps, like very simple. And then later we added, single page apps, and then more recently, powerful APIs, microservices, and so on. And it's going to keep going up forever. There's no limit to that, and it's always going to be insecure. So I'm not really worried about job security.
We have to finish on something positive. I'm guessing business is pretty good at contrast security with all these app security issues.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a good thing.
It's a fantastic time for application security. I do think we have a unique offering that our use of instrumentation is incredibly powerful. It gives us that access to what's going on inside the running application. That solves so many problems related to speed and scale and ease of use. And I think what we can really do is empower even small AppSec teams inside companies that are currently massively overwhelmed by the size and scope of the problem. We can empower them to do their job and create real value for companies. So you're right, it's a long road, but I think this is the path.
Well, keep doing what you're doing. You've been at it a long time, and we are all very appreciative of your contributions, and keep doing good work at the company.
Well, thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, great
awesome
time.
to see you. And we'll see you next time.